Hi, I'm Steve Barlow. This is the Humanised Workforce Future You podcast video, where we're talking about perceptions of the future, issues that we need to be aware of, and their role in a rapidly changing work and life environment.
Hi, I'm Craig Saffin. The Humanised Workforce Future You podcast series is focused on the key factors evolving to create a more humanised workforce and how people from all walks of life are creating their future selves. Yeah, it's really interesting now with the way technology is delivered, different ways of doing it. Like I was out with some friends last night and we were talking about a particular book that I'd read recently, and while we're at the table, one of the people downloaded it as an audiobook, and he said he'd listen it to the gym and while he's commuting, and another person wanted it as the paper book, and another person wanted it to read on their Kindle. And so all people around the table said, "Oh yeah, I want to read that book," but they all decided to do it in a different way, which I thought was, wow, that's amazing. And they just are using their own best learning style, but they're doing it right.
So I think another thing is listening to people's stories. I mean, you learn a lot from people's experience and, what they've done and the experiences they've had, or, how they look at their perspective, how they look at life, or how they look at certain situations. And, reading biographies or autobiographies has always interested some people, and there's always value in that. But these days, there are so many podcasts available. I mean, you and I did the first series of 50 podcasts with 50 different people.
Yes.
Exploring their views of leadership. And everybody had their own way of looking at it. Yes. And there were common themes.
There were a lot of common themes, yeah.
A lot of common themes. So there are patterns that, part of listening to a story, you listen to one story and you get a certain perspective. But if you listen to 50 stories, you start to see where the patterns are.
Right.
And these repeated patterns, they tend to tell you what's important.
Yes.
So, you might spend 20 minutes listening to a podcast, but if you listen to 50 of them, you end up with a much broader perspective on what really matters.
Yeah, for example, the leadership piece was very important in the post-pandemic world and how to lead into the future. The higher EQ was just mentioned by everyone in a different way. They didn't necessarily mention EQ. They didn't necessarily mention emotional leader, but they all said in their own way that this person needs to be much more human and connected, really connected with the people they're leading, rather than just ticking boxes or being authoritarian, right? I think that was an example of the way things came through. What about trends? How do you keep up with trends as part of your learning process?
Oh, well, I suppose if you expose yourself to these things, you're going to sort of pick up on trends, particularly if you look at, say, podcasts or listen to podcasts or YouTube videos that are recent, that are current. I'm not saying that the ones that are older are of less value. You might not be able to get the right perspective on the current ones unless you have a historical perspective.
Right.
And that's probably very important if you're a young person and you didn't necessarily live through that, or you weren't paying attention to what was happening in the past. But I think that, if you keep your eyes open and your ears open, situational awareness is a really important thing. In the aircraft thing, if the thing comes down, you better pay attention to what's going on.
Yeah, sure. It sharpens your attention, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you want to pay attention right there, right then.
Yeah.
And I think that looking and listening and being open to learning, that keeps you up with trends. I suppose the harder thing to develop is the skills and the capacities.
Right.
You can know knowledge, you can gain new knowledge,
yes,
and become aware of trends and so on. You can learn to some extent the skills and capacities from listening to people's stories.
Yes.
And not necessarily the content of their stories, but the way that they see life, the way that they process reality. So it's listening to story on a different level, not just the content, not just the storyline, but a higher kind of dimension there of how did this person navigate their way through this situation?
Yes.
And maybe there are skills there that I can learn from them. But you have to listen for that. If you just listen for content, storyline, you might miss that level.
Yeah, but when you're doing that, one of the things I do is I'm trying to apply it to how would I do it, right? Because it's not only just learning from the person who's explaining it, but also your application, your personal application of the same sort of thing will never be exactly the same, will it? Because you have your own style, you'll apply your own skills to it, right?
And even your own style may not necessarily be appropriate in all situations, or it mightn't work as well because the river's moved on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But I think that this is where collaboration, sort of support groups can help. If you've got a trusted relationship with one or two professional people in your area or similar area, you can pick their brains and say, well, I've got this situation. What would you do? Or how would you approach this?
Yeah. But some people are not able to pick it up, are they? They're not able to adapt and change, but people who do have that change capability can. One thing I've noticed, actually, just mention this, is a simple example is, people were talking about political correctness for a long time, and then all of that morphed into the woke sort of phenomenon. But really what diversity, equity, and inclusion is trying to do is just make a more respectful environment, whether it's a community or a workplace. And some people have shown, because of their power base or how they're trying to do it, that they're not able to do it, right? Or they push off and they resist it strongly. But this is an example of not being able to adapt or to move with trends. But the people who are heading up the DEI, and we've interviewed some people who have a lot of experience with diversity, equity, inclusion in our podcasts to date. They're just pushing ahead, and the momentum and the community capability is overwhelming the naysayers, I think. And I think that's an example, isn't it? Whether if you're not on with the trend, you don't have to be an early adopter, but the later you get, then the more foolish you start to appear. And I think we're seeing that more and more just with that particular example.
Well, I think that is a pretty good example, because it's an example of flow and of getting stuck.
Yes, it is.
If you've got the big perspective, the big picture perspective, you can keep the flow going.
Yes.
But if you focus too much on little issues, you can get stuck and you can't move on. And so that's all part, though, of our personal growth, to be able to have that.
So, Steve, I might sum up for today, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely.
Okay. So today we moved on to talking about putting on your mask first, which is all about leaders practicing what you preach and taking the initiative and showing leadership up front. Within that topic, we wanted to cover 4 main areas, which is valuing growth and role modeling and preparation awareness and preserving and abandoning. Today we talked about valuing growth, and within that we were talking about personal growth and professional growth. And so I hope you found it interesting, and next week we'll continue with the putting on your mask first theme, and we'll move on to role modeling. So I hope you'll join us for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for watching this video on Humanised Workforce Future You. Please leave a rating or review for the series on the medium where you source your videos.
The transcripts for today's video can be found on craigsaffin.com. Please subscribe to the series to avoid missing out on future episodes.